your questions very short, and then I don't know if there are still questions after all that, but Bernard.
We haven't even asked questions. You're asking us to keep them short. The first one is a comment, and then I have like a couple of questions. I think this is really great, and I thank you for organizing it, because 24-hour economy was marketed as some 3x3 shift system, but it's actually an economic transformation thing. So if you hadn't done this, and if you hadn't preempted the launch with this, we probably would have still gone into the press, the main release, with a very limited idea of what it is. But that also creates a problem for you, because in the minds of the public, it's just a slogan they use as part of what they wanted to do in the election. But this is really serious stuff. So our work is very difficult as media to try and get people to understand what it is. So you need to be patient and to also be realistic in what you expect us to do. Because for a lot of us, the first time we are hearing this level of detail. So it's actually an economic transformation program marketed as a shift system. Right? And there's also a political issue where now both your opponents and your supporters have a certain perception of what it is, and it's not really what it is. It's actually much deeper. So if after you launch it, you're not getting the right coverage, you need to know that it may take time. I'm saying that as a journalist. Because I'll say even after the interview with you was when a lot of people actually understood what the hell 24-hour economy was. A lot of people were just talking about 3x3, but didn't even know what it meant. So for a lot of my colleagues in the newsroom, they say, oh, so this is what it actually means. So it's a bigger thing than we all see. Having said that, I have 2 questions, or 2.5. You said this is off government balance sheet. And you mentioned and hinted how things like, Exim and DBG will come in. We have a massive financing gap in Ghana. What is AFDB and Afrexim and other African financiers interested in this? Because what you are trying to do is beyond the finance in Ghana. That's question 1. Question 2, on the basis of what I've said about how people see it, are there specific targets? Because you have 3 pillars, you have 4 principles, you have 8 programs, you have many, many projects. A lot of things are going on there, right? From a communication perspective, are you able to tell us milestone by end of 2025, this is what we want to see. End of 2026, what we want to see. By end of the administration's term, we need some specific things, because there are too many things happening in this 24-hour economy. So that's question 2. And question 2.5. When you explain the financing thing very well, the fact that our interest rates don't support manufacturing, but you missed out on power. Our power cost also.
Part first. The Volta Economic Corridor and other parts, because this is all over the country, there are other projects in Western North, palm oil and so on, as part of the value chain. But we know the problems of the cost of power. We know the need to recover legacy debt. We know that legacy debt is around $2 billion or something like that. That has to be priced into the electricity bill. Knowing that, and knowing where this Volta Economic Corridor is going to basically be situated, our energy mix for this program is solar power, attracting new battery technologies that allow for 24-hour provision of power, combined with bioenergy. If you build large agricultural parks, you're going to have a lot of agricultural waste. So you use that agricultural waste to generate energy. Particularly if you have industrial parks who will need gas and are far away from the gas pipelines to be able to fire their boilers, particularly for food and beverage, processing, evaporation, and so on, crystallization and so on. So that's second. Third, the grid itself. In the area where the development will occur, outside the exclusion zone, because near the gorge, you can't go there, where the dam is basically proximate to the dam. So everything will have to be upstream and downstream of Pong. The transmission backbone there is very weak. It's about 69 kV. So we obviously have to find other means and that's why the solar, the waste to energy is important. And the model we're using is a model that's evolving. Where you, Bernard, as an investor, come and say, okay, you need 50 megawatts in your agroecological park. I will build a solar plant. It's about 1 megawatt per hectare. I will build a solar plant, 50 hectares. I'll sell you electricity, and the protocols of this program for the industrial parks and the agroecological parks, you cannot sell at more than 5 to 7 cents per kilowatt hour. And it's perpetual, and it's renewable, and it's carbon friendly in terms of environmentally friendly. So on top of that, you then build also your capacity to generate the requisite carbon credits for offsets, both in the voluntary market and also in the state-to-state market under the Paris Convention. So we've designed this in a way that it can be financeable. It provides the energy mix that will attract industry. And eventually, once we get out of our problems with the grid, both in terms of reinforcing the backbone around that area, I'm told that they want to do a loop from Tamale and then basically bring it around to across the Volta so it's more resilient. Once you're able to achieve that, then the mix may change. It may be grid, solar, and then bio. But that mix has to be there, as many other countries are beginning to adopt. I'm sure you know that California is totally stressed now by electricity outages and so on, because there's so much pressure, particularly during the summer when everybody has their air conditioner on. So it's not peculiar to Ghana. There are outages even in New York sometimes. So we have to get the energy mix right, and within the incentive environment that allows people to invest in captive power, in microgrids that support industry and agricultural production. So that's number one. Okay. Number two, specific projects, targets. We're now doing the concept notes for the implementation because we've been approached by several international bodies. I don't want to name all of them, but I'll just name a couple. Okay. AFDB, Avle Exim, who want to be part of this program and who want to see Ghana begin to provide the pipeline of projects that allows them to use their ADF to finance. One of the problems they have, and NASA has made it very clear, Ghana's pipeline of projects is incoherent. It's not tied to any particular transformation agenda. It's project by project by project in silos. And more importantly, the project pipeline is not enough and it dries up very quickly. And then new ones are conceived and they are abandoned. I'll give you an example. Mechanization support, which is part of the agroecological zones, which will be private sector owned in our program. The public mechanization centers, some of them are in the bush, growing wheat. So we looked at all this, and as Nas said, fantastic projects going on in Ghana, financed by this MasterCard, North Fund, this, but they don't hang together. And the idea is to concentrate our efforts in the kind of ways that we prevent the fragmentation, and also we concentrate the output. So we do have targets. And the concept notes we're developing is designed and based on these targets, because no bank will finance you if you don't have a clear target of what your output is going to be, what your input is going to be. So we're expecting, for instance, in the agroecological parks, in the value chains, soya bean, groundnuts, rice and so on, to achieve targets over the 5-year period, which at the very least will let us cut imports by 50%. But the specifics are being worked out because that's scientific things. You don't just get up and because one of the reasons why several programs have failed, and I'm not in any way downgrading possibly the good intentions around the 1D, 1F. You don't design programs because you want to produce. You design programs because the market wants it. So you work back from the market, both in terms of output, in terms of demand, in terms of market saturation, in terms of opening new markets, but most importantly, in terms of your price competitiveness and the reliability of your supply chains. A lot of people export shea nut and so on, shea butter young, small people, craft, cocoa, chocolates. They send it to America, they send it to Europe. You know the biggest problem we have? It's not consistent. The demand is there, people want it, but there's no consistency because we have so many problems. We want to remove that consistency and inconsistency and bring reliability and predictability to Ghanaian exports through the program that we're doing. So we do have quantitative targets and we have qualitative targets. One thing Nas didn't talk about, and it's very essential to the program, is standardization and the role of Ghana Standards Authority, FDA, to get our goods acceptable in foreign markets. Don't forget that the Europeans, as well as the Americans, the Americans more blatantly in terms of raising tariff barriers, but the Europeans have non-tariff barriers, NTBs. And if you've looked at the recent, I urge you to look at them, all of you, the recent EU sustainability rules. We have to school our people to achieve those standards so we can enter those markets. Because one day, if you are not schooled and implement those standards, you're out. So standardization, levels of quality, ISO certifications, and so on are going to be very key. So inevitably, this program cannot succeed without boosting Ghana Standards Board's capacity, not just as an entity in Accra, but all over the country. Labs that test food for microbiological content, E. coli, salmonella, are all over available in the country. Now, SGS with Tema and Takoradi and Kumasi, that's it. Even Takoradi, they do mostly oil testing. Kumasi, I think they do testing for cocoa. But food, no. So I'll stop here and let Nas take over with the other. And H2 is here to assist. So Nas, please take over.
Arnold would want to add something small in terms of the financing. Arnold, that's him. Yes.
Thank you very much. So Bernard had raised the issue around the financial institutions and then the capacity for finance, both locally and internationally. And we've heard that there are a lot of international financing partners that are ready to finance the activities under the program. But most importantly, the key theme for financing the 24-hour program is also to look at it from a value chain angle. And this is why this program is different from a lot of the programs that have come before. The value chain, an integrated value chain. And so, for instance, when you look at back to the poultry industry, and you are thinking of the birds that are going to be sold at Christmas, it starts with maize that they've been fed with. And so the poultry farmer needs financing to buy maize. And essentially, that can have a figure. But that can also have a type of credit. So it's maize he needs, not really money to buy maize. If you can tell the maize farmer, for instance, to provide the maize to the poultry farmer on credit, a supplier's credit, that has a value. You've been able to move maize to the farmer. Now, the maize farmer also needs inputs. He needs seeds, he needs land, he needs water, and that also has a value. And so you'd realize that you could be looking at, if you look at them separately, sector by sector, and layer of the chain by layer, typically this cumulated amount becomes a lot because the maize farmer needs maybe about 1 million cedis, the poultry farmer needs about 1 million cedis, and then the input suppliers also need about 1 million. And I'm just looking at, let's say, a specific volume of production. Now, that can look like 3 million. But you see, with 1 million cedi of financing, you can unlock what is like 3 million or 10 million cedis worth of credit that is required because you are looking at the chain. And so by the time you are financing the poultry farmer, that same level of finance goes up the chain to the maize farmer. That same level of finance goes up the chain to the input farmer. And so that is the very different approach that the program undertakes, such that with just a little amount of financing, once you look at the value chain around all the sectors of a particular product, you are then able to finance multiple layers. And in that way, we now end up doing far much more than has been done previously. So that is also the unique approach for financing that the program is going to look at when it comes to enterprises across the various priority sectors.
I think we can take some more questions if there are still questions. Okay, the gentleman there. Yeah.
Thank you very much. My name is Ibrahim, GH1 TV. Look, two quick things I want to find out. So before we got where we are today, this was a campaign promise. We were told about shifts, employment creation. If you peg that against what was in existence, which you have just mentioned, one district, one factory, many believe that the agenda was almost the same, create employment, get industries in places where they don't exist. Now, as part of the targets we are looking at, are you looking at the low-hanging fruit? I mean, companies existing, ready to ramp up production with your support and provide immediate employment before you look at the big-ticket projects as you're talking about. That's one. Two, what's the level of collaboration you are going to have with the National Development Planning Commission? Because sitting here and hearing you speak, I see many of the things here are groundbreaking initiatives that you want to take. That could be tied into even the 40-year development plan that your government initially wanted to roll out. Is there a collaboration between your outfit and the National Development Planning Commission?
Yes, NASA is a member of the National Development Planning Commission. NASA, as part of our collaboration with the National Development Planning Commission. And you're right, in building this document, apart from the many authors from the private sector, we also looked at some important documents historically. We looked at the 7-year development plan, Nkrumah's plan, which basically had some of the vision of the Volta Economic Corridor that we are going to implement now. We also looked at the NDPC 40-year development plan, and the Savannah, the one written by Charles Abrugi on the transformation of the northern section of Ghana, the Savannah zone, into a productive force. So we revisited that, and that's why we have the Tamale Vegetable Hub at the Tamale Airport Vegetable Hub. So we didn't just get up and conceive. In fact, a lot of what we're saying is not really new. It's there, and what we've tried to do is to aggregate it and add some creativity. But the most important thing, and I think Arnold has just mentioned it, is a value chain approach, the integrated approach. And that's really how we approach it. So yes, we're collaborating with the Ministry of, all the ministries, and also definitely with NDPC. Because NDPC is a planning component. And so whatever we do must fit into that planning component and that outlook. I've been told that I talk too much. So Nas, can you kindly, or Ish, if you want to.
Yeah. I think you've adequately answered the question. We're working closely with the NDPC. Like you said, I'm a commissioner at the NDPC. We're making sure that we integrate all of this. And I mean, the chairman of the NDPC, Nimoy, was actually part of the manifesto committee that worked on the 24-hour economy. He made a lot of inputs into the program. So there's a lot of coordination that's going on over there. There are a lot of low-hanging fruit. And maybe, Charles, do you want to even talk about some of the... So when you talk about low-hanging fruit, it's across, across industries and across value chains. There are those in the manufacturing sector that you are referring to, and that's part of the reason why we are looking at the incentives regime and all of that. Because you see, part of the problem that if you look at 1D1F we had is that there was no logic to why somebody gets a certain incentive and why another person doesn't get it. So it was basically pure, it's like, cha-cha, you get it, you don't get it, or whatever. We want to remove that by ensuring that we streamline that regime. So it is clear why somebody is getting it, and there's logic to it. And then there's also a lot of other low-hanging fruits at that agri sector. I don't know if we want to talk about it yet. Do you want to talk about it? Okay, good.
Okay, thank you, Nas. We have anchor farmers already existing, and definitely they already have their lands and their farming. And what we want to do is to support them to increase productivity and also expand on their farms. So what we have on offer will be supporting them. And this will be done from now till the end of the year as we work on developing the Eden, Eden Volta corridor. Also, we have processors who have the same situation. And as Nas explained, the farmers have to first of all supply the raw material before you can start doing the double or triple shift. So we're working to increase productivity and production so that the excess can go into manufacturing. And then in addition to all this, we have our own list of projects we are calling low-hanging fruits. For example, we have a Shikpon intervention, which has to do with the urban and peri-urban vegetable farming. And the idea is that people are already doing this. And so why don't we support them to have solar-powered pumps, for example, and boreholes? And with this, they could be able to give us very healthy vegetables that can supply the cities, not only Accra, but all the cities. So, Honorable Goosie mentioned something about standards. As you all can bear with me, after we had our metric system change to the metric system in 1974, since then, there've been very little enforcement of what it entails. For example, we still sell in volumes. We are not using weights to sell agricultural commodities. And that is another low-hanging fruit that we want to work on. The last but not the least has to do with the way we convey fruits and vegetables from the hinterland. And by the time you get to Accra, if you take yam, for example, as a commodity, we have 70% post-harvest loss in yam, mainly because of the way we handled it after harvesting. And it ends up having a lot of bruises and gets infected. And by the time it gets to the market, most of them, you buy and get home, you can't use it. So we want to support farmers to be able to convey these products in crates, either, wooden crates or plastic crates that are standardized. And this then can also help them to preserve and manage the post-harvest arrangements properly.
Okay.
I think let me end here. Thank you.
Thank you. And Dr. Dodu will add a bit
Yes.
to it.
A couple of you asked questions that also relates to partnerships. I think Bernard and one of you, and at the same time also there were questions that relates to how we mobilize to get here. So as Goosie said, this is really a national mobilization, and it really relates to all the factors of productions and people who have worked with that. We've spoken to organized labor, those who produce, those who process, those who aggregate, and those who create the market themselves. To the extent that we've had a very wonderful conversation with trades union and the marketers who actually brings the goods from hinterlands to the market, and we are able to work with them to create their supply chain all the way to the market. Now, in terms of how we have organized with partners, we have mobilized several partners in various categories. We have the bilaterals who have expressed explicit commitment to this initiative and are going to work with us. We have the multilaterals. We also have the international financial institutions, private sector, diaspora communities. We have also been engaging foundations that, some research and academia. So the whole range of organization in terms of partnership that can help to really lift such a program is very key, and we have been able to manage with them. The other point is, beyond just the traditional financing that we talked about, we have also looked at innovative financing. As you know, majority of our production is going to be very consistent with environmental and social governance components. It is going to be smart in terms of agriculture that we're going to produce. It's also going to be very precise using digital technology and so on. And all these will lend themselves to impact initiatives where impact investors will be looking at, beyond just looking at how they make money. They're also looking at how you actually impact the environment. And so impact investors have expressed a lot of interest. There are interests that have been expressed by diaspora, wealthy Black Americans and others who really have the financial wherewithal, and they are looking at where they can actually invest their money. So they have a wide range of different instruments that we are looking at, SDG bonds, diaspora bonds, and so on. And then we're also looking at the share value of wealth that is embedded in the climate ecosystem, so climate financing as well. So as you can see, we have evaluated the entire ecosystem of this initiative in terms of the producers, in terms of the processors, in terms of those who want to finance this economic venture, and in terms of those who are our development partners that want to work with us and partner with us, and in terms of those who actually bring the brain power, and even those who work with us on market accessibility. The last point I'll make is that because of the interest and opportunity for Ghana to actually leverage the African Continental Free Trade Agreement area, we have structured our production in such a way that it meets the requirements of this AFTA, so that we can access 425 million West African and about 1.3 billion African states. So this is really a very powerful mobilizing opportunity. And I want to reiterate again what Goosie said. You cannot really make an impact with this kind of program without nationally mobilizing and looking and working together. There's only one side to what we have, is Ghana and Ghanaians and the citizens of the nation, that we are the ones that really can work with it. So this is really the message, that if we really mobilize in a very powerful way, this will be a moment of change in history, and all of us will be participants of this historical shift. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Dodo. We'll come to Charles briefly, but let me take some more questions. We have to wrap up at this point. Joy News, I thought I've asked your question already. Okay, well, let's go to the gentleman there, and then we'll come to Joy News.
Yeah. My name is Atamensa from Ghana News Agency. Yeah, I think this is a very laudable program and very comprehensive. And last week, when the delegation from the presidency met the Speaker of Parliament, he suggested that after the unveiling of the document should be presented at the floor of Parliament for comprehensive debate by parliamentarians, by both sides, to have their buy-in, so that we have seamless implementation of the program. Will you agree to this suggestion to present it before Parliament for debate? That's my first question. Then, when you talked about water development corridor, my mind was just going why, but that you have something like the free zone where you have companies set up in particular places. So I want to find out, maybe geologically you have a place maybe in the eastern region that you have designated for the water development corridor. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Maybe I'll just box one more in, then we can answer.
My name is Kenneth. I work with Joy News. I have just about two questions. The first one is, have we drawn any lessons from the countries that have successfully implemented the 24-hour economy? I know that we are very late to the party when it comes to this 24-hour economy. There are so many, especially developed countries, who have implemented this. Have we drawn any lessons from them? Because when Mr. Goosie Tanoh was making his point, he did indicate that when you are bringing out a policy, you have to know that, is this a policy that the people want? We've seen it before, where we've implemented something like the National Health Insurance Scheme, drawing inspiration from the highly successful NHS in the UK. But as we speak today, there are two opposite, health insurance schemes. So have we drawn any inspiration, or have we learned any lessons from the countries that have successfully implemented this 24-hour economic policy? And the second one is, is the rollout going to be nationwide? Is it going to be in the Greater Accra region? Is it going to be across the country? How is it going to be like? And then I might have missed this, but how much are we investing in it? So these are my questions.
Okay, NASA will take all the questions and I'll round up. Thank you.
All right, I have this. Okay, so let me take the first one around, have we learned any lessons from other countries? And you did mention that we are late to the party. We are not late to the party. And I say this because if you take a look at all the, and I'm sure when you talk about when you make a reference to countries that have implemented the 24-hour economy, you are talking about companies that have countries that have done the 9th shift. And a lot of it is actually cities, not countries. So I'm sure the examples that you have, when you take a look at them, it'll all be cities, right? And it makes sense for cities to do the 9th economy thing. When we refer to the 24-hour economy, like you saw during the presentation, this is an economic transformation agenda that would lead us to that place where we have a completely optimal economy that is generating the levels of job creations and prosperity for its people that we require. So in that sense, we are not late to the party. We are embarking on an economic transformation program to change, the way things are done over here. And there are several examples around the world to look to. So in building our program, we've taken a look at what the Asian tigers have done. We've taken a look at China. We've taken a look at what places like Denmark, they've done to the economy. So there's been a lot of looking at what have different countries done to transform the economy, and then also situate it in the context within which we find ourselves. And that's why, like Mr. Tanoh mentioned, we took a look at different programs that the country has. So the 40-year development plan, we looked at it. We looked at the 7-year development plan from Kwame Nkrumah. We've taken a look at the SADA plan, that was developed for SADA and all of that. So have we taken lessons from other places? Yes. Are we late to the party? Not at all. This is our own 24-hour economy that we are going to execute for our people.
He's asking if you're doing a nationwide rollout or it will be...
Yes, and also, like I said, this is an inclusive program which is meant to cover the whole of this country. So you're building an economy that works not only for people in Accra, but that works for people all over the world, all over the country. When we talk about the Volta Economic Corridor, the Volta Economic Corridor is not in Accra. The Volta Economic Corridor is all the different districts along the Volta all the way to the top. There are several things. I mean, we look at, when we think about machinery park, our machinery park, we're looking at Kumasi for it. We're looking at garments parks in 7 locations scattered all over the country. So there's so much that's going on everywhere. And when you talk about the value chains that we are focusing on, a lot of the agric doesn't actually happen in Ghana. It happens in other parts of this country. Right? So it's actually not an Accra-focused program. It is a program that focuses on the whole of the country as a whole. And yes, you have a lot of businesses in Accra that might get to the destination quicker just by virtue of the fact that they are in Accra. But it's not just an Accra-focused program.
Okay, so there was a question from GNA about whether we are ready to debate the whole policy on the floor of Parliament, and then also whether we're going to take a form of a free zones, is what GNA is asking.
Okay, so let me answer that. There's been approval to convert the current 24-hour secretariat into an authority. Of course, to get it passed by parliamentary majority, you need to debate the content of the program to justify the creation of authority. So it's inevitable that is going to happen. The second thing is that can I get the GNA question again?
So it was on whether you're ready to debate it on the floor of Parliament.
Well, I think I've answered that.
And then also the free zones, whether we're going to have an enclave.
One of the problems, and I think Nas mentioned it, is the unpredictability and lack of coherence in the incentive regime, which most investors look at, not only foreign investors, but domestic investors. So what you want to do is to create a coherent regime that is based on performance and not on location. So in our discussions with the Ministry of Finance, to adopt an incentive regime that's acceptable to the investor community as well as to the government and the IMF, because we're in an IMF program. An impact analysis is being done to see whether we can then implement what we proposed in a way that establishes stringent discipline, predictability, and coherence in our incentive regime. So that if you are an investor, you know that if I do A, B, C, D, E, F, this is what I get. I get a rebate in income tax. If I do A, B, C, D, F, I go 3 shifts, I get a tax credit for each additional shift that I do beyond 1 shift. Those are the kind of things that we're talking about. And so you don't necessarily have to be in the free zone to get those benefits. And we saw a lot of problems with the free zone, and we've tried to incorporate it in the incentive regime that we proposed.
Okay. Joy News missed out big time on the cost, and I know he'll be in trouble with his editors.
Okay,
so if you are feeling generous,
let
you
me
can do that for
quickly
him
do that.
again.
We said that the initial projected cost, we're still in the calibration stage, is about $4 billion US. Of that, about 300 to 400 million will come from government to support the viability gap requirement to make sure that the bulk infrastructure is commercially sound and therefore will attract private sector investment. Because government is involved in the IMF program, they have to test these suggestions to the IMF, and it doesn't have to be in one go. It can be a crawling seed, contribution of seed money to give, and also the requisite seed money for the authority when it's set up. So that is the ask, and we believe that we can raise a lot of that. In fact, some of the potential commitments you have already for the enterprise finance and the capex component of the bulk infrastructure and enterprise capex is heading now towards 2 billion. But it takes a little time to negotiate these, and of course, because they're confidential, we cannot immediately reveal until we've actually signed on the dotted line going forward. So by this time next year, we should be able to announce what kinds of resources are available to implement the program by the private sector. The money is not coming to 24-hour secretariat. It's going through mechanisms straight to the private sector based on a very disciplined, well thought out protocols about who can benefit, why they benefit, whether they're in the value chains, whether they belong to an association, whether they are cooperative, and so on, so that we can build this extraordinary private sector we have to the levels that allows them to not only produce the low-hanging fruits, and the lowest hanging fruit we have, for those who ask the question, is the $2.5 billion of food we import from the rest of the world, which we can produce here. That is the lowest hanging fruit.
I think we are going away with a lot of fruits in our basket today, but let's do a quick clarification from you.